Good afternoon and welcome to SportWorks Talks. My name is Christian Page and it's great to have you all with us again this afternoon. And with me this afternoon is Eric Mitchell. Eric, hi.
Hi, Christian. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here at SportWorks.
It's great to have you here. As we've said during our last presentation, because of the COVID challenge, we've restructured our studio. So we can't be sitting side by side, but we've got a good 2 meters distance. So we will be sort of switching between us as we conversate today. So great to have you with us. It's another SportWorks talk. We're going to have another 20-minute presentation. Eric's going to give us some great insights into the IOC youth young leader alumni perspective, which I think of what it should be all about, actually. It's going to be great to hear what he has to share this afternoon. And as always, we will have about a 20-minute Q&A at the end, so you'll have opportunities to ask Eric questions about the program and about his experience as one of the young leaders in leading this program. So enough from me. Great to have you with us, and I'll hand over to Eric.
Hi, thank you, Chris. It's so nice to be here. Yes, like you said, I am really excited to be here to speak about the IOC Young Leader Program, but more than anything else, I'm very proud to be here as an alumni of this program that has done so much for young people in the world of sport. I think that as we talk about it going through, I'll talk about my personal experiences. I was a IOC Young Leader in one of the very first stages of the program, and then I've had the pleasure to mentor the next generation of young leaders who have come through as the years have gone through. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, a lot of challenges that we worked through, and a lot of successes that came out of this program. So I look forward to sharing some of my personal experiences. Of course, there's also the next generation that's coming up, and I look forward to speaking more about how the program has developed over the years and some of the ways that I think other organizations can look to this program as they try to implement a youth program and a youth strategy similar to what the IOC has done. I do look forward to sharing my perspective, and as we go in, I can just say that we'll speak about a bit of my introduction of some of the lessons that I've learned. We're going to talk about how to attract and retain young leaders and make sure that they're a valued part of the sport system. And then we're going to talk about like what I think comes next and what I think is going to be really important to look through going forward as we get the next generation involved. And I am looking forward to a lot of your questions, so please keep them coming. I can see them coming through the chat already. So hi Olia, hi Rohit, hi Rina. It's nice to see you all joining in, and I can't wait to share some of my experiences. So before we get into it, really, I think it's important to start with a little bit of an introduction because, I mean, look at this photo here. So this photo is one that I keep very close by because this was taken on my very first trip to Lausanne. It's at the original IOC headquarters, which was not the sensational building that it is now, but I was very lucky to be there with 16 other of my IOC Young Leader peers from one of the first waves of the program. So as you can see on that slide, there was 17 of us in that second wave, and there we are in this photo here. It means a lot to look at this because I think it really shows to how far we've come as a program. When we first came to Lausanne, we had just launched the first wave of the IOC Young Leader Program, which had a different name at the time, but the premise was more or less the same. We were all young people and we were working on projects in our local communities, and this was our first chance to meet. And we got to stand up in front of our peers and present the programs that we were working on in our local communities. And I've never felt quite as proud to talk about Pass the Torch, the program that I had founded in Canada, to a whole bunch of peers who have become some of my best friends now. It's really cool because, I mean, in this group, you'll see that I did a little math beforehand, but I was circling our heads, and out of the 17 IOC Young Leaders who sit on IOC commissions, 8 of us were already there from the beginning. So I think that speaks to the capacity building that this program has done for leaders within the movement. And really, there's nothing but growth to come out of this. We've seen that the program has developed from 11 to 17 to 42 to 55 young leaders now. That's pretty impressive. That's a tight timetable, and I think that it shows that there has been resources put into this program. But I think that before we jump into some of the successes and challenges that we've worked through, I think it's important to talk about how this program has developed. So let's take a little look at what happened in 2019 when we met the last time.
matter how you got here, where you're from, which network connected you to us, we are all part of a family, we're all a community, and we are part of a movement that believes in the power of sport, right? You guys are doing it every day in your projects, with your initiatives. You are making tangible differences in people's lives, and you are having an impact.
It's really important to be a part of this IOC Youth Summit because you're meeting people from different countries from all over the world. So you're learning about their experiences with sports for change, and you learn from their mistakes and from their successes as well.
We might not be in the same continent, but we can get to a solution together.
These youth summits are for me always a highlight of the year, and now they have evolved into a group of young leaders. They see now the full picture. They are part of the decision-making process within the IOC. So there we get a lot of inspiration for the future of the Olympic Games and the Olympic movement.
Wonderful. I've seen that video several times. You may have seen that video several times, but each time I watch it, I look back at some of those moments and I'm taken aback by what has happened so quickly. It's so nice to see those faces, that commitment to youth inclusion in sport, and it's so well done. And the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, we have had 116 sport-led projects happen, and that's directly benefited like 30,000 people in the local communities that our young leaders are working in. And that's impressive. I mean, each of these projects is promoting the Olympic values such as respect, tolerance, peace, gender equality, and they all address specific problems. So when you're looking in that room full of IOC young leaders, it's really, sport is being used as the multi-purpose tool that it is to solve many of these local problems. And I think that's what makes it a successful program. But going forward, I want to share a bit of my perspective on how the IOC Young Leader Program has become as successful as it is. And I think it really comes down to three key factors: a good invitation, relevant capacity building, and then finally value creation. And from an institutional standpoint, everyone wants to get to value creation. Like, that's the gold standard. That's why you're putting in place any program, any project. You want to create some value for your organization and the stakeholders of your organization. But there's a couple of steps that need to come first, in my opinion, in order to be successful at that. And the first one is an invitation to be involved. So when I was first invited to join the IOC Young Leader Program, it was in a hotel lobby in Lillehammer, Norway during the 2016 Youth Olympic Games. And there was just a couple of slides that were presented that the IOC was looking for young people to basically create a program that was going to fix some sort of problem in their local community, and it was going to use sport to do it. And that kind of started the gears turning in my head about what I could do when I went back home to Calgary to really use sport as this tool to solve some problems. And it took me about a year to go through that ideation phase and find what I wanted to do. But what I ended up landing on was a program called Pass the Torch. And Pass the Torch was a program that took athletes who had just come back from the Youth Olympic Games, where they had the experience to compete with athletes from around the world. They got to live and breathe the values of Olympism. And they also got to learn a lot about different parts of the Olympic movement that they probably never heard of before. And then they got to go home to Canada, and they had a choice. They could either just chalk that experience up for something that was great for them, or they could use those experiences to share with their local communities. And many of them wanted to do just that, but they didn't quite have the bridge to do it yet. So what I did was created a program where these athletes had the tools and resources that they needed to go into their schools, into their sports clubs, and into their local communities to really share these values and use sport as that tool to get people engaged and motivated. Invitation was key because it wasn't like I was asked to do a specific project for the IOC Young Leader Program. I was invited to do my own project, and I was supported with seed funding and with technical resources, which was really important. And it leads really nicely into the second key point, which is capacity building. So the IOC Young Leader Program, in my perspective, was effective because it did the work to develop these young people as leaders. Myself and many others, we were benefiting from monthly calls with experts within the IOC. We were paired with subject matter experts. We were paired with external experts who wanted to give back to this community. And that was a really important spot because you didn't feel like you were on your own doing this project. You were supported by the relevant experts and by the machine that is the Olympic movement. And that is, those 2 points come back to attracting and retaining your young people. If you can attract them by giving them an invitation that they're interested in, and if you can retain their interest by doing relevant capacity building, then I think that you're doing a good job of attracting and retaining that young talent. And that will give you value creation. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was at the 2018 Olympism in Action Forum in Buenos Aires, we were sitting with our IOC Young Leader group. We were invited to attend the forum, which was, I think, a very insightful discussion of what the future of Olympism looks like. And we were put on a drafting committee to form a summary document of what does this summit mean for the Olympics and what does the Olympic movement look like going forward. And we were all paired with senior IOC members. And we went to each of the sessions and we sat with ourselves as an IOC Young Leader, and we sat with a senior member of the IOC, and we both listened to the same presentation. It was on urbanism, it was on digitization, it was the future of sport. And then we went back and we debriefed one-on-one what we heard from that presentation. And often we heard very different things from the same presentation, but it was because we were viewing it through a different lens. We were young people, and we had fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. And while we were different on some ideas, there was also a lot of common ground that we were able to synthesize and create a pretty extensive summary document that captured the mood in the room. And it wasn't just filed away at the IOC. It was one of our fellow IOC Young Leaders, Josefina Soles, and IOC member John Coates stood up in front of the IOC session in Buenos Aires, and they presented together their findings side by side on the front of the stage. And I think that that's just the type of value creation that you don't always get if you haven't put in the work before. If there wasn't an invitation that was appealing to us that went out, and if there wasn't relevant capacity building to make sure that we were equipped to effectively sit at this table with these senior leaders, then we wouldn't have been able to produce such an exhaustive and thorough document that is very reflective of the current state of affairs. I think that it also goes to the fact that there's 17 of us who sit on IOC commissions now. And from my personal perspective, I know that the conversation is different when you have young voices at the table. When you're talking about trend spotting and risk mitigation, there's a couple of good examples for when young people are really, the tip of the spear. But we've heard for years from the former US Vice President, about the importance of climate change, the hockey stick graphs, but it took Greta Thunberg, a young Swedish girl, to really bring that conversation to the forefront. So I think when organizations, they should see an opportunity to bring youth to the table, but they should also see a way to cover your risk, because young people can spot these trends straight away. What comes next for the IOC Young Leader Program is something that I'm really excited to share, because as members of the program, we really help shape what comes next, which I think is incredibly important when you look to build a holistic approach to youth engagement. It's not just ticking a box, it's having these young people be part of the decision-making process and help develop a program that's appealing to them. And that's really what we did. We sat with the members of the IOC, and we worked to help create this next wave of the program. And it's going to be really impressive because it is happening right now. There's already some of the first 6-week learning sprint happening, and I know that there's a ton of interested young leaders who have already been engaged. 3,000 of them have applied to be part of this program You saw that slide before. There was 11, there was 17, there was 42, there was 55. The fact that 3,000 young people have tuned in to be part of the next generation speaks volumes to the desire that there is for young people to be at the table. The cool part is, though, that we have developed basically a four-year program. So the IOC Young Leaders will have capacity building throughout their journey in the program. And they start with a 6-week learning sprint. So there's a ton of capacity building right off the front to get people up to speed with the program. Because I've talked about this before. When you want to bring young people to the table, I often am met with a question like, well, there's not the right experience. And that is a line that's used to kind of be a gatekeeper to bringing many people who are outside of the general conversation into a conversation. They don't have the right experience. But that's not what they're looking for here. We're looking to hear your voice and have your perspectives heard. And if you have a 6-week learning sprint where you can get up to speed with the basics, you can bring that to the table. And I think that that's a really important step forward for the program. So I'm excited to see that. I'm also as we go forward even further, we see that there is 4 different stages. So not only are we set to go out into our communities for a year and make a difference, we are tasked with a 4-year commitment here. And that starts with ideation, moves on to design and launch, scaling, and then, of course, sustainability of the projects that we're working on. I've had the privilege to attend several high-level international events for innovation and ideation, and this is exactly the framework that is being used at other top-tier organizations. And I think that something along these lines is really important when an organization decides to put in place their youth programs. The IOC truly is doing it right here. I'm really proud to see that the long-term investment is not ending soon. It's only just beginning. And on that note, I am really excited to kind of share some of my experiences with any of you who have some questions, or if we can dive into some more specific topics. But I hope that I've kind of helped to explain my perspective on the IOC Young Leader Program, why it was successful, and what we can do going forward to continue to make it so.
Eric, great presentation and some really inspiring figures. We've talked about this before we joined, and it's great to hear the successes of the program. So if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. One question I've got, you mentioned about coming to the table, and you mentioned that you've now got 17 representatives sitting on IOC commissions, and it's an interesting topic, like bringing youth to the table. Do you feel it is notional? Is it just to say, okay, we've got to listen to the youth, or do you feel it's really embraced by the top executive?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, because I mean, when you look at it, I think we're very lucky to have such strong buy-in from the IOC president. He's really been having our back from the very beginning. I remember we got a chance to meet him in that first meeting in 2017. He came over to the room we were working in, and he spoke with us and he listened to us. And he continues to do that. I mean, we're very lucky to have as much access as we do. And I think that tone at the top is incredibly important, because when you have the top of your organization valuing young people, then I think it really does follow down the line. That's really important. But it's not just about ticking the box, because when you actually are at these tables, assuming you have the right capacity building that's happened beforehand, then you can really take on the issues and raise the right points. And it often is not like you're the one who has to come up with the big solution, but it's the way that you respond to comments that are made within a meeting. It's the way that you are able to stand up and say, what about this? Have we considered this? And those are just small things that do change the conversation, and I think incrementally will lead to more value for young people, and not just having them sit at the table.
That's a great answer. So, and great to know that you've got that support. We briefly touched on it before, and I think it is essential to have that level of engagement. So another question, and coming in from the chat, thanks for the question, Olya, great to see you too. How can organizations working in sport benefit from this program?
Oh, well, how can organizations working in sport benefit from this program, Olya? I think it's quite clear that anyone who's gone through a program such as this suddenly you have a young person who's like motivated and empowered to go make a difference in whatever organization that they choose to work and give back into. So this is just one start to the program. Like you go through this program once and you're so much more equipped to take on other problems. Like your social entrepreneurship just starts to flourish from that point. So I think that having a program such as the IOC Young Leaders is just like that springboard that you need to take action in other areas. Having the confidence that you have been able to reach top leaders in sport is valuable on all accounts. I mean, I think that more young people who see themselves as leaders it just starts to grow as you see more of these young leaders who can go back to their communities and just continue to be active. And this is just that stepping stone and a springboard to get them there.
So that kind of segues into the next question. Thanks for that answer, and thanks for the question, Olya. The question here from Gustavo, could you give concrete examples of how those young leaders influenced the sports landscape?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great program. I think that young people have decided and really taken action to the fact that sport can be used as that multi-purpose tool to help solve local problems. And that's easy to say, but it's often hard to point to those concrete examples of where sport is really making a difference in their local communities. And when we look at some of the projects that have been delivered through this program, such as the Champ Camp done by one of our colleagues, Walid, who's in Jordan, he talks, I mean, it's an incredible program, and he's working with young girls to get them weightlifting, and that's delivering a ton of benefit to that local community. And I mean, it wouldn't be possible if there wasn't a program such as this one. And when you look at the development of these projects, you can see that not only are they sport-based development projects or sport-based gender equality projects, they're a holistic approach to like getting more people involved in the sports system. So I think that when you have those young leaders who just are actually on the ground, you get a lot more relevant information, and you can start making decisions based on that new information. Like youth is a huge group of people, and we're not just a whole bunch of numbers on the report being like the social media channels have reached this many young people with likes and impressions. It's like we can point to specific examples of number of people showing up at these training camps to work on their physical well-being. And I think that's a really good way to show that concretely these programs work.
Great. It's great to see that there is progress. So thanks for that answer, and thanks for the question, Gustavo. Mm-hmm. There's a question now here from Matt. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Eric. It is great that the IOC is so supportive of the program. Mm-hmm. It would be interesting to hear of any challenges with that generation gap between the old and the new, and maybe how other organizations have faced it. That's a great question. Thanks, Matt.
No, undoubtedly, that's the truth, that there is, of course, there's some friction between the different generations. And I think that the IOC Young Leader Program is no exception to that. And I think that we've been able to work through it together. I think the reality is when you bring a whole bunch of fresh perspectives and new people to the table, there will inevitably be some friction. And I think that's really important to have that at least brought out, because the reality is if there is friction happening, it's not just because there's friction between two personalities or two generations. It's often because you have your real structural issues that need to be addressed. And the fact that they're being at least brought to the forefront, I think, is incredibly important. So when we're talking about like friction between the generation gap, I think that it has to be viewed as an opportunity, and it has to be viewed respectfully from both sides as well. I mean, to be honest, like I've sat in a couple of meetings, and I've had to raise points several times. It seems like, there's sometimes it doesn't take traction the first time. When I want to see more youth representatives on a variety of commissions, it's not happening instantly. And I think that we all need to work together to keep raising the issues of why it's important to have young people there, because sometimes things are hard to get through, and there are changes that are hard to make, but it's not impossible. And I think that other organizations can look to organizations like the IOC, but it's not just the IOC that's really working to bridge that generational gap. Like I was at an event with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Melinda Gates was speaking about the importance of having young people at the very center of all of their projects that they do at the foundation. And on the front wall of their building is, "We do nothing for youth without youth." And I think that that's just the approach that needs to be set in stone in order to make that conversation effective for both sides.
Great perspective, great reference point. You mentioned several times capacity building. What do you mean by capacity building? What's that look like in terms of in the context of what you're doing in the youth program?
Right. Well, I mean, capacity building is broad, of course. Like, what is capacity building? It's also one of the Sustainable Development Goals key targets, in many of them is capacity building for communities. And I think when you're looking at young leaders, what makes a good leader? It doesn't need to be a young leader. What makes a good leader? I mean, they're very good speakers. They're often very empathetic, and they're very able to tune into their people who they're leading and being able to hear from them. So I think that when you're talking about capacity building, I mean, one of the things we got to do straight away with all of our projects is we are continuously pushed up onto the stage to talk and share our perspective with our peers. So straight away, there's that the public speaking element, which I have been through many workshops and through many different opportunities to have my voice heard. And I think that that's a really key competency when you're looking for young leaders and people who are confident enough to speak up when they're sitting at the table, is just the ability to stand up and say something as a young person. That's, I think, a really important capacity. But at the same time, the networking is really important as well, because I mean, the reality is I mean, there's a lot of power in proximity, and the more people you're put in connection with, the stronger your network is, and the more basically the further your ideas are going to go. So the fact that, sure, we're having a youth summit where we're brought together, and there's a whole bunch of leaders within the sport movement invited as well, and there's all of those chances for cross-pollination and networking that can come out of that, is a really concrete way to have capacity building for young people. And it's not impossible even in the current circumstance. I think that one thing that's often overlooked is that we all need to be physically in the same room. And I would like to use the current context we're in as a good example for that. I mean, one of the things that I've learned throughout this project is that not everyone has the same access to, I mean, even broadband internet, where we kind of take it for granted in a lot of places in the world. But without good broadband internet, I mean, it's tough to connect. But I mean, if there's a chance for people from places where there's not good internet to call in to be part of the conversation, that can be really effective as well to being that bridge between two different worlds. And that's capacity building as well. So I hope those are like kind of some concrete examples of how you can build capacity in youth.
No, great answers. Thank you. No, and it's important to have the context of it. And I'm going to just jump a question here. There's a question here from Rohit about how to build a young leader in short time. We talked a little bit about this before we came on the program, and I was really impressed by the program that you run. So I'd be interested. Maybe that's an opportunity to share that.
Well, I think that, I mean, when you're trying to build young leaders, I mean, in a short period of time, it's hard to do anything. But I think that if there's a will, there's the way to do it. I mean, how it started for me was really just spotting an issue and just working at it directly. And you learn a lot along the way. And you can feel, I mean, mistakes are made and there's challenges that come. But I think that if you have like a clear focus of what you want to get out of the program, you can find the wins along the way and really start to effectively share them and build that coalition behind you. For me, I worked at my program for a year and then immediately knew that I needed more people to help expand it and scale it. So I had Taylor Rook and Maggie, both two excellent young leaders from Canada, take up my program and start building it in different parts of the country. And that gave me a whole bunch of new experiences as a young leader, because I was able to see how it was growing in different areas, and I had to kind of provide support to the next group. So suddenly I was giving things that I didn't even know were required. So I think that, I mean, being a leader is standing up for what you believe in and using your voice and your power and your privilege to create something that's meaningful to other people. And it's as simple as that. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps you answer your question there, Rohit. I've got a question here from Laura Maria. Hi, Laura Maria. What do you think of the title of youth representative, etc., at panels? Are we kind of tokenisming, and I'm going to try and say that a couple of times fast, tokenisming the youth voices like this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, Laura. I often am surprised when, there's that youth perspective or youth panelist at any of these events, because in fact, we're just members of the conversation. It's often, I think, overlooked the fact that we have a perspective on many other things other than youth. I mean, when I'm at any panel event or any discussion, it's always surprising to me to see like youth is a topic still. Youth doesn't need to be a topic. Youth is across the spectrum. Youth should be involved in every topic and every panel. I mean, just as we've seen really big developments with panels with more gender diversity, I think that the fact that young people should be on most panel discussions should start becoming the standard.
Sort of bringing it is a collective. We need to have the representation, and it's a great point you make. So thanks for asking that question, Laura. So great comment here from Annette. Thanks for the comment, Annette. Thank you, Eric, for the great presentation. I really like your enthusiasm about the program. My question would be, these projects are for profit or non-profit ones? Do you get a personal mentor who helps you to develop your business plan during the 4-year program? Great question.
Yeah, great question. Very specific question. I like it. I mean, honestly, first of all, my enthusiasm is authentic because I am inspired by this program and what it's been able to do. So I'm glad that that's coming across clearly. But the reality is these programs are turning into social businesses. So they are moving towards a model where like perhaps that there is a revenue stream, but that revenue stream is directly targeted towards increasing the reach of the program. So, I mean, that takes different shapes around the world. My program specifically was really about taking what wasn't a very capital intensive idea and making it accessible to all. So the seed funding of a couple long-term capital assets in the form of presentation banners and presentation equipment went a really long way. But there's other programs that do require like that ideation to build the business plan to make sure it is a truly sustainable endeavor, because that's very important. And that's exactly one of the topics in the 6-week learning sprint, is how to develop a sustainable business model for these ideas. And I think that that's really important.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. It's great to know that there's the whole program is quite inclusive and quite detailed. It goes into many aspects. So thanks for that question, Annette. Question here from Evgeny. Hi, Evgeny. Dear Eric, I know we must work hard to involve younger generations to the Olympic movement. Did the IOC do research on how many young people know about the Olympic movement and the games and etc.?
Oh, that's a really interesting point. I know that one thing that I think is kind of a paradox with the Olympic sport is that often like top athletes and many other people within the Olympic Games are young people themselves. And I'm often like surprised by the fact that like it's that at the Olympic Games, young people are often given some of the loudest megaphones in their entire lives. Like I remember when I competed at the Olympic Games, I just couldn't believe how there was like the entire world was watching these sports that we had been doing with nobody watching for many, many years before. And the fact that the Olympics was able to shine such a bright spotlight on people and athletes and have their voices be projected around the world was just so impressive to me. And I think that when you talk about like young voices at the Olympic Games, is just making sure that responsibility as Olympians and as responsibility as athletes and that responsibility as stakeholders in the Olympic movement is really translated to each person who is involved, because everyone in some way represents those rings if you make it part of your life. And I think that we all have a responsibility to give back to a sporting world that we know has given so much to all of us.
Yeah, great response. Great. And I think you mentioned earlier too, there's an initiation program that runs for the 6 weeks where you jump in quite intensive to learn about the Olympic movement, which I think which kind of fits in that comment. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that it's more of that. We need to I mean, I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see how these 3,000 new candidates play out, and I'm excited to hear their feedback of how this program is going for them, because it really has been a work in progress. It's not going to be perfect, but I think that it's a great step in the right direction. I can't wait to see the ideas, the innovation that's going to come out of 3,000 young people who are all as passionate as they are about the future of the Olympic Games. And I think that when you're talking about anything from generational divide to having a real seat at the table, the reality is that young people have a passion for seeing these games be successful, this movement to be long-living and enduring, and we are just as passionate as anyone else to make sure that that is the case.
That's great. So, Evgeny, there's another comment there just from Laura Maria. The IOC is also researching and involving the youth perspective for their new Olympism in Action strategy. So that might be something else you can look into. I've got another question here, and probably this is, you mentioned it in your presentation about working with the people, the experts within the industry. How do people get involved? Because I look at my own experience. Right. I've been involved with the games for a while and would love to give back and have that opportunity. Are there opportunities for people to volunteer or to participate in these programs?
Well, of course, that the program is being under development, and I think that there are a lot of relevant experts who have a lot to give to this next generation. But I think that it's a little bit simpler than that. I think that we can just go back and find those young people who are in specific subject areas who want to learn more, and just starting to be that mentor to them and to kind of support them along their journey. Like anyone who wants to get involved with the program, I think it's very welcome, of course, but at the same time, it shouldn't be just limited to the IOC Young Leader program. There's way more than 3,000 young people who want to be able to build their brand in sport, and I think that there's a lot to be learned and a lot of value created on both sides if more senior members of the IOC machine, the Olympic movement, start to invest in the next generation.
Great. Okay, and I take that as a great point, because there are opportunities within the sport industry, within the sport working community. We have a lot to give back, and there's some great opportunities to do that. So I think for my colleagues on the other side of the equation, there's some great opportunities for us to perhaps look at ways we can further engage with the youth community. So on that note, I just want to say thank you, Eric, so much for joining us today, for being here, making us and sharing this program, and to help with the awareness, to build the awareness and better understand how the Olympic movement is participating and how it is engaging with youth, and how we can all contribute going forward. So I really want to say thank you very much for your input today.
The pleasure is certainly mine. I'll hop onto that last point, because even myself, I am looking for the next generation to give back to as well. It is incredible, the ideas that I've heard as the second wave of the program comes up. Everyone's messaging me in my DMs. They have ideas, they have suggestions, and I'm just all for it. I'm excited, and I'm willing to give back to the next generation. And I think that that's a perspective that anyone can give. Even the generation that's one below me is already leaders in their own right. And I think everyone has something that they can give to the next generation. So thank you for giving me this platform. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Christian, and everyone else who's tuned in today. So thank you, and go out and be that sporting prowess that you want to be in the world.
Great stuff. So again, thank you all for joining us online. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all with us. Thank you so much for your questions. Great engagement. Really appreciate the questions, and some really top questions in there as well. As always, please stay safe, and we wish you a safe afternoon wherever you are in the world. All the best, and bye for now. Bye, everyone.